I know that this episode is going to sound like a rant, and I probably won't be able to run away from that. But the most interesting part about it is it's still going to sound like it makes sense from like a logical perspective, because I'm about to use a Denzel Washington quote, which should hopefully make me sound a little bit smarter in the entire thing. Because I'm about to go off on the internet, or just the fact that I'm not a particularly big fan of the internet right now, and I'm about to give reasons why. But before I can do any of that, where are my manners? I should have started with an intro. Welcome to the Breakdown Podcast, where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is Sir Denver B. This is a shortened, or should I say shorter, less edity, no instrumentally version of the podcast that I usually like to do whenever I'm on break. And it also gives me a chance to kind of just chill back a little bit, just discuss one topic, and it makes it easier to record and push out whenever I'm supposed to be on a break. Now, while I was planning this whole break thing and like me going on break and what it is that I discuss, and also to a pretty good chunk, the stuff that I've been discussing of late, one thing has kind of stood out for me quite a bit, and it's the internet in general. Okay, not necessarily the internet in general, I'd probably say social media, but I feel like most of the social discussions are happening on social media, so that's basically what I refer to whenever I'm talking about the internet. And I don't know, like there's a quote that Denzel Washington once used where he said, if you don't read the news, you're uninformed, but if you read the news, you are misinformed. And, it's one of those things that people listen to and they're like, yes, the guy was spitting facts. And, if he says that, then, we shouldn't trust our news, blah, blah. And, you can agree or disagree with that. But one thing that I can say for a fact is that's been my reality when it comes to the internet and social media and discussions regarding the topics that I cover. Like, if you don't have your ear on the ground, then you're very uninformed and there's a lot of stuff that you miss out on. But if you have your ear to the ground and, you're listening to all of these, conversations that are taking place on the ground, virtually speaking, then there's a very good chance that you could become misinformed. At least I believe so, and I'll get to why in a bit. And it's something that I feel like I've started to notice a hell of a lot more, because there's some biases that I've noticed with a lot of the discussions that go along online. And when you spend a lot of time on the internet, first of all, I think one thing that everyone admits for a fact is people have been saying that spending too much time on social media, spending too much time on the internet isn't healthy for you. And I agree. And as someone who has consumed content from the internet, as someone who will continuously be spending his time on social media and on the internet, especially when it comes to getting content, I can't agree more. Like, it's getting to a point in time where I am actually going online and I'm looking at the content that's coming out, and I feel like it's all kind of leaning one direction or another, and a lot of it isn't very positive, and it started affecting me in a certain way. And, having spent quite a bit of time on the internet and, looking at the kind of content that I look at, even beyond a lot of the content that I discuss on this podcast, there are some things that I have gotten to learn. And for the sake of you not having to spend as much time on the internet, I feel like you can get to know these things as well if you haven't already noticed or felt them within yourself when it comes to the content that you consume, which should tell you a lot about the content that we consume online that relates to love, sex, and relationships, or even just relationships in general. Now, the first thing that I learned when it came to a lot of the content that I was checking out online, especially of late, is how anytime there's gaps in a story that is in regards to relationships and someone is asking for advice, the very first thing that people gravitate towards is infidelity. Like, people will hear, oh, my girlfriend didn't talk to me between this time and this time, or my boyfriend didn't do this, or my boyfriend kind of went silent or go silent within this sort of period of time, what's going on. And the very first thing that people just go into is, that guy's probably cheating, or she's probably cheating on you, or your partner's probably cheating, or you're probably being cheated on by your partner. It's just that you haven't noticed it yet. Like, it's such a go-to answer for so many people nowadays online, and it's such a go-to answer for so many people on a regular day-to-day these days, that I am actually starting to get to a level where I'm starting to question if we're just looking at it as the fastest answer and not necessarily trying to see if it might really be the right one. Now, don't get me wrong, like, infidelity has been quite rampant these days. Like, cheating is at an all-time high, at least by my perception and by my understanding from a lot of the stories that I've checked out and a lot of the stories that you'll hear out here, whether online or offline. And it is genuinely a problem. But the whole assumption that because there's gaps in a story, it automatically means that your partner is cheating on you is something that's a little bit of a stretch. Especially if, like, for example, your partner doesn't have a known history of cheating. So even though it could or couldn't be true, like, the whole diving into that as like the very first reason and probably the only reason could be the reason why a lot of people are a lot less trusting nowadays. I will admit, I personally feel like I am less trusting in the relationship context these days, because it's like you're almost always thinking that your partner might cheat on you at any given time. And like, I don't know if it's just a lack of trust or if some people might actually start getting to a point where they are feeling a certain level of paranoia. And it's something that if you don't really pay attention to it, you might not notice it, and you might get to a point where you're just not that trusting of a human being. Now, with that said, the second thing that I noticed is a lot of people, when it comes to relationship stories, when it comes to stories that revolve around a relationship or like some sort of intimate interaction, if any one of the two people is slighted and talks about it, it's like the very automatic answer is usually to tell the person to just leave them. Oh, this is a red flag, I'd leave. Or why do you end up taking that? Just leave. And it's such an interesting thing because, like, even some of the smaller issues, those that can be discussed, you're finding that people are saying, just leave, sis, or leave her, bro, she's for the streets. Like, you find that people are so against the idea of talking about shit, of trying to find the root cause and trying to handle something. Yet you find that a lot of people on the internet like talking about wanting to have longevity in their relationships. They would want to have the sort of relationships that, let's say, ideally speaking, like your parents had, or, some parents that had, or like old people that who've been together for like 50, 60 plus years together have had, where it's like they're in the 80s, but they still seem like they're very in love, or they're together and they're very happy with each other. But it's like at any given point in time, there's a small issue or someone's slighted or someone's triggered or someone notices some version of a red flag. All of a sudden, everyone is busy saying, just leave. And you really think you're going to hit that number? Like, a lot more people nowadays aren't staying in relationships. And granted, it could be a good thing because at least it's not like you're tolerating some issues like abuse and so on. But at the same time, there's a lot of people that are getting out of relationships that are not considering staying in relationships because of small issues that can actually be resolved. And a lot of that can be traced back to the fact that people are nowadays telling everyone to just leave instead of trying to find a way to talk shit out. And more often than not, the reason behind this is actually point number 3, which is a lot of people like to perceive the sort of stories and contexts and the people that are being discussed as worse than they actually are. Like, for some reason, you find that people will always talk about the other person as worse than they probably are, even though it's a situation that is entirely within one particular context. Like, for example, if someone says that, oh, I didn't like the fact that my partner on Friday evenings would leave and go out with the boys and would be coming back on Saturday evening when he's super drunk, and I didn't like that. And someone else will come and they'll be like, oh, being with a drunkard like that is a red flag. This person is most likely going to turn into an alcoholic and they'll mistreat you, and there's a good chance that they probably have something with another woman. And I know that because my ex used to do the same exact thing and his friends used to do the same exact things, and all of them are like degenerates or some shit. And all of a sudden it's like, yeah, now this looks like it's what is going to be the reality for you. Yet you're looking at the reference point and it's like 1 or 2 cases. It's not like it's a common thing. It's not like it's something that can't change. And yet the reality of it is there's a lot of things that can actually change in a person. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that making someone change is easy or it's something that happens to everyone when it comes to just about anything, because, that in and of itself is a lie. But there are certain habits that people can actually stop or adjust based off of certain changes that can happen in their lives. Like, there's people who probably after having an accident will choose to stop taking liquor or stop doing drugs or something of the sort. There's times when people talk about how they used to, for example, party a lot, or they used to act a certain way and they knew that their partner was uncomfortable with it. But at some point the partner was like, hey, have you ever considered that you shouldn't be doing this forever and you should try and think about your future and like For example, like how it'll be when you have kids and blah, blah. And it forced them to kind of think about things a little bit differently. And they started working on something, and with the help of their partner, they managed to change their habits. And I know this mainly goes back to the context that I was talking about with the example, but it's something that you forget can happen on a lot of different actions, on a lot of different vices. You can change, you can adjust your habits to doing something different, or you can switch up and do something completely different that's more productive. So thinking of people as worse than they currently are isn't something that actually benefits any of us. It's just something that you find a lot of people talking about on the internet or on social media at the very least. Now, moving to point number 4, a lot of people like love. A lot of people love love, and they say they love love on the internet. The only problem is the one thing that they love more than love itself is tearing people down when that love just doesn't work, or there's a breakup, or there's some shit that's happened with one person, or some case of infidelity. It's like any negativity that attacks love is like content fodder, or like fun for a lot of people to kind of go and enjoy and to hate on. And it actually really, really sucks. You see that happen a lot. You see people busy talking about how, I love love. I'm celebrating the two of you. And that time people have posted up like a wedding photo, or them being intimate, or them holding hands or something of this sort. And it's like people will be super supportive and be very encouraging to both of those parties. But wait until one of them suddenly comes out with a cheating scandal, or they have issues, or a case of abuse comes out, and they end up splitting. It's like people are almost celebrating, where it's like, oh, we expected this shit to happen. Oh, now you decided to show us all of this love. Now look at you guys not being able to stay together. Or tuliwaambia, mtaachana tu. Or just some negative shit regarding relationships. Like, you find that people are so quick to talk about stuff and like point out the fact that they never really saw hope in the two of them. But when these guys were in love on the internet and were loving loudly, which actually isn't a particularly bad thing, provided that you keep things modest, like, everyone seemed so supportive. But the moment some negativity comes up, or like the two of you split, it's suddenly like the internet wants to rejoice, and they will make memes and enjoy themselves on the fact that you got dumped, or you were cheated on, or some shit's happening to you, which in my opinion I think is very, very cold and very, very nasty. Although more so than that, it shows something about people, which leads to point number 5, which is the fact that people are just so extreme and so negative nowadays online. Okay, I don't know if it's a nowadays thing or if it's always been like that, but people are always looking at the extremes. So it's the extreme worse and it's the extreme negative. And it's like people are always looking into that. People are always looking into some version of cynicism. Like, you're hearing people busy talking about how they wouldn't want to have kids because the world's already fucked up. So why would they want to bring children into this current world? Shit like that. Of which, if you're not a positive person, you can very easily start to think about stuff like that and be like, you know what, maybe not having kids is a pretty good idea. Or just about any social matter, which probably requires a balanced outlook, or, a biased outlook based off of your gender or something of this sort. And people are just diving towards like the worst side of it. Like, for example, the whole, would you rather be stuck in a forest with a man or a bear? And it's like all of the main comments that are getting the most likes and the ones that are appearing the most prominently are the ones where the women are saying that they would much rather be with a bear. They're not talking about how they would much rather be with a man. And that's something that, like, it gets to a point where when you're dealing with all of this negativity from, even the first 4 points, and, you're listening to people online, it just gets to a point where it just becomes so negative and so draining. And it can actually even make you a much darker and a less positive person, which honestly I don't think should be the case. I think we should be pushing more positivity. I think we should be trying to look at things from a different angle than from what someone else said on the internet, which could be regurgitated information or a regurgitated opinion from somewhere else or from someone else. And that sort of critical thinking and balanced opinion is something that I don't see as much of. So, considering that that's the case and we're not seeing that much, critical thinking on the internet, what I can tell you instead as a conclusion is sometimes you need to turn it all off and you need to go and touch grass. Like, that is probably the best solution that I can give you. Like, turn it all off, and forget about all the other people online's opinion, and then just go and just try and live life without thinking about how it happens online or how it relates to something online. Because once you have your own experiences, you can draw your own conclusions. You don't have to think like someone else or in relation to someone else. And, it could save you a lot of pain, could save you a lot of negativity, and it could save you a lot of cynicism, which, you think about it, is quite a bit of a problem for a lot of people these days. Although, then again, maybe it's just my side of the internet, maybe it's my algorithm, maybe I'm wrong about this, so I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open. On IG, it is at the Breaktime_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the Breaktime Podcast. And on X, it is at Bagaka the D. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.